Thank you very much to Jim and Michelet from Tracr for coming on and speaking with us about industries and how they're using blockchain to provide transparency and traceability from diamonds from the mines.
Thanks a lot for having us on. We're excited to be a part of one of the first sustainability series webcasts. Looking forward to more of those. My name's Jim Duffy. I'm the CEO of Tracr. I've been with Tracr for nearly 2 years. What we're doing at Tracr is to connect up the diamond industry. So we hear about a lot of technologies, blockchain being one of them. In my career, I've worked in tier 1 banks. I've worked in database companies, and now connecting up the diamond industry with basically an Industry 4.0 web platform that helps us solve a number of problems. So maybe I'll let Michelet introduce herself, and then we talk a bit about the challenge spaces and then how we're solving it. But there's just an open conversation to talk about our journey.
Also, a big thanks to Jim and to Tracr for sponsoring this series about tech for sustainability.
If you could just quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you, Erica and the Crypto Curry Club. So I'm Michelet Brown, Industry Transformation Lead with Tracr. I've been with Tracr for about a year now and have a background in sustainable development, and have joined the team to lead on external engagement, amongst other things.
Thanks, Michelet. Let's dive in. Let's start first with Tracr's purpose, connecting the diamond industry for the purpose of establishing provenance, traceability, and authenticity throughout the entire diamond industry. There's a number of reasons why that's important. The provenance of where things come from, more than ever, and increasingly, dramatically, year on year, the provenance of understanding the impact of source environments for materials, whether it's diamonds or cobalt or copper, etc., or even manufactured parts. Understanding where these things come from and making sure that they're sustainably and ethically sourced is paramount. Traceability is essential to make sure that you have a connection between that source environment and where you have it, and then making sure that what you have is authentic. So we see that the purpose of Tracr, extremely relevant to diamonds, of course, but also very relevant to a lot of other materials as well. And you'll see number 9 and 12 there. If you're not familiar, those are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The ones that we're most closely related to are number 9 and 12 being industry, innovation, and infrastructure. 12 is responsible consumption and production. There's 17 of those goals, and I encourage everybody who's not familiar to just have a glance at those, because they're really the 17 dimensions that if we all pay attention to, the world will effectively be less broken and maybe even a better place. So before we talk about the solution, let's talk about some of the challenges of a disconnected industry. And almost all industries are, and value chains are disconnected currently. And we see this with the strain of what's happening in the world today. Supply chains are buckling under the pressure of being disconnected. Some of the challenges there, you'll see, okay, this is relevant to the diamond industry, but of course relevant to a lot of others as well. Producer and manufacturer, jeweler, retailer to consumer, from left to right, and then financiers up above. Producers did have difficulty telling stories, a lot of manual processing, incompatible business systems. They have to interface with a great many other companies, just like many of us do in B2B platforms. And that's always an integration challenge. Having a common utility is what's required. Competitive market, the compliance overhead of making sure that we're observing all these rules, whether that's in the diamond industry or in banking. Anyone in finance will understand the compliance overhead is real. Quantifying risks from a financier perspective is also that's the nature of their business, is gauging risk. But if there's an opaque supply chain or a disconnected supply chain, quantifying those risks becomes a lot more challenging. If things are connected and we can watch the information and the inventory flow, now those risks can be better quantified and qualified. And then you see the challenges of demonstrating ethically sourced materials to consumers and also to governments. Not only are we just proving this to the end consumer, but governments are also asking us now, where are these things from? Were they sustainably and ethically sourced before they're allowed to be imported to a certain zone? And Michelet can talk about that towards the end. We'll talk about how we're working with the World Economic Forum. So we need some new tools to solve these challenges. When we talk about traceability, we're really talking about connectivity. And we talk about blockchains being a network, and networks are there to connect us all up, to be decentralized in a way so that we can all do individually our own business and keep track of our own inventory in the sense of what a connected value blockchain platform is doing, but also being able to transfer those digital assets down to other participants on the network to make sure that that connectivity is maintained. So if we talk about creating digital assets for each and every diamond, let's talk a little bit about that. I'm sure that the audience might have varied experiences about what we consider a digital asset. So let's define that a little bit. And if I go quick through this, because I've done this slide about 100 times, please ask your questions and we'll field them. So to create a digital asset, first we have to collect unique data. There's three really different types of digital assets. There's sort of a cryptocurrency, crypto commodity, crypto token. I would call this more of a crypto commodity. This is in blockchain parlance, it's a non-fungible token. ERC 721 is the closest standard to relate it to. It's a little bit different than that, but that's how it works. So to create this digital asset, we have to first collect the data that corresponds to it. For diamonds, that means scanning them. 3D surface scans, images, the precise weight, the situational information of where it was, when it was, etc. All of that unique data. The second is to register it and match it automatically. We're using compound artificial intelligence and machine learning models to make sure that we're identifying, registering, and later on matching each and every individual diamond at the material level. The next part of a digital asset clearly is writing it to a ledger, a distributed ledger. We're using Ethereum for that. Proof of authority is the consensus mechanism for now. That's all we need for the moment. We can imagine later on a different consensus method, maybe a different ledger. We're not particularly wedded to a particular ledger. We think that Ethereum will carry us for a long way, but we'll see on the out years. And then the last part is to share securely this data. If we're going to create a network and we're going to trace things, it has to be shared. If it's locked inside of one person's business, then we haven't really achieved our goal. What we're doing here is making sure that with creating a digital asset for each and every individual diamond, now we can ascribe certain data to it. So say we want to tell a sustainability story about what's happening in Botswana, which is a large diamond producing country, in terms of maybe the ratio of protected lands compared to mine site, which is something that people are scarcely aware of. Making sure that those good stories are not only just known by people out in the world, but are attributed to the specific diamond that came from that area during the time that sustainability initiative was active. These are examples of the kinds of stories we can tell once we've got the digital asset created. Maybe Michelet, if you could walk us through the different steps in the diamond supply chain, and everyone listening could just map this to many of these steps actually exist in almost every other value chain. We just happen to be working with diamonds.
Great, thank you so much. As Jim said, this is going to be put into context with the diamond industry, but you can think about your own supply chain as I talk through it. The first thing that happens in this process is the digital asset that Jim has spoken about is created at the producer level. Now, this registers country of origin and the authenticity of that diamond. The asset and then its corresponding physical diamond are then transferred to the manufacturer, with the data being captured at each stage in the manufacturing process. Now, as we build this out, this is not necessarily a comprehensive set of steps, but we need a lot more time to build that out as well. So planning, cutting and polishing, grading, etc. I'd like to stop at grading, because when it comes to grading, we've gone one step further. So we've enabled third-party verification of a grading certificate. And this is the first time that a grading certificate has actually been made a digital asset and is then linked to its diamond digital asset counterpart. So that's quite important to note over there with what we've done. We continue to keep track of that digital asset along each step in the downstream process to the jeweler retailer, who then transfers it to their end consumer. And now at the end of the process, we have a complete digital asset, full traceability, authenticity of the natural diamond, and then the digital grading certificate that's then linked to that digital asset of the diamond. This is the diamond industry's process, and what we've purposefully done is we haven't introduced new steps to their process, and we're not asking them to use new machines. They're using machines that have existed for many, many years, and that is the IoT devices that Jim spoke about previously. But this is pretty much the process stage and how we map our technology above that.
And another point about this is we see these supply chain processes, and as that physical asset goes through any value chain, okay, a diamond or a bar of gold, or maybe it's a luxury handbag, who knows, that process has been well established, and we're not going to change that. So it was important at Tracr to go out into the industry and make sure that we could map our digital process above the physical industry process without changing it. And that's what we've achieved. That both gives us operational, technical, and we're also proving through the launch of our platform later this year that it can be economically sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability, there's a couple different aspects of that. We think of, okay, the environment and these sorts of things. But if we're going to solve those problems and shed light on sustainability initiatives, the platform itself has to be sustainable, meaning it's not going to be too expensive, it's not going to fall over sideways, and it's not going to change industry processes such that nobody can adopt it because they have to blow their businesses up. And that's what we've proved the end-to-end traceability from left to right on this. And now we're beginning to do it at great scale. We're getting eventually many hundreds of thousands of diamonds on the platform every month.
How do you tie the digital asset to the physical? Is it impregnated somehow?
Yeah, we get that one. We don't physically modify, and thanks for the question first, I like this one. We don't physically modify the diamond at all for the purposes of Tracr. Later on, a diamond is often inscribed, laser inscribed with a very, very tiny number that's imperceptible to the naked eye. That's data, so we use data. We'll take any of the data that's out there, especially the more unique the data is, the more we like it. Situational information about, we call this metadata, where things were, when they were there, how long they're taking to get from one place to another. All of these help us maintain traceability. But we don't modify the diamond in any way, that's clear. If it is inscribed, we use that data. All the unique data that we create, you see there in the first step, the purple step, that gives us the ability to have an extremely high confidence match, like mathematically improbable or impossible to swap one out with the data as we go through the matching process. And maybe I'll just add one more point to that. In here, between the transfer of ownership, here you see between the producer and manufacturer, and also between the manufacturer and jeweler, or whoever that goes to, there's sort of a handshaking process between that we don't transfer the digital asset until we confirm ownership and possession of the physical diamond by the entity, so a manufacturer, on the other side. Only then when that, say a producer sells a diamond to a manufacturer, they'll scan the diamond, send it to their instance of Tracr. We find the matched diamond, and only then we transfer that digital asset into their instance of the Tracr platform. We've put a lot of robustness and security around that protocol of passing the digital asset, the non-fungible token, from owner to owner to owner, and then eventually down to the consumer. I hope that answers the question.
How do you ensure that a specific miner has really mined the diamond?
Yeah, sure. So we get this one a lot too. If I'm not from the diamond industry, I've been in tech and banking and all over the place, government. Coming into the diamond industry, I wanted to go see what this all looked like. Good luck trying to get a diamond out of a diamond mine if you're not supposed to. It's one of the most secured environments in the world. You can imagine like a handful of these little diamonds might be many, many millions of dollars. So those zones are so tightly controlled and surveilled that getting something in or out of those environments is a very, very good reinforced factor that we are getting them where we say that we're getting them from. Above that, there's often these diamond mines are partially owned by governments, so there's that element to it, and certification of where these things come from. We're taking the scans in the country of origin, and potentially also at the mine site. So as close to where it was located as possible. The De Beers fleet of, they call it Dead Marine, there's this fleet of vessels that have giant robots that sink to the sea off the coast of Namibia. We can also imagine those giant diamond hoovers that get the diamonds off the bottom of the sea, scanning the diamond directly on the ship before it was seen by human eyes. That's probably in the next, on the out versions, but that's the extent that we can go to make sure that we're observing the diamond for the first time as close to where it was found as possible. And then the second part of that is, the inevitable question is, how do we make sure we're working only with sustainable mines, that sustainable and ethical mines? That's been well established, and really it's a matter of evidencing all of the good that diamonds are doing in those zones. It's more about how many schools and hospitals and kilometers of road are built, rather than any issues with any producing countries that we work with. So,
is there demand for this from the consumer or from the industry, and what have been the main pushbacks in the adoption?
Yeah, great.
Other than coronavirus.
Yeah, sure. Damn pandemics, they'll get you every time. Both is the short answer, and the longer version of that is the consumer. Often when we build digital platforms and we build solutions for businesses, really in a more general context, we want to make sure that we're working with a well understood problem definition, and that we are in fact solving a problem with what we're building, because then it has the value we expect. I've never come into something with a problem definition so well defined as a DiCaprio film, to put it bluntly. And when we got started with Tracer, we were already sort of 10 years late in terms of a persistent need for a solution and the consumer's demand for this sort of a thing. So the consumer is driving demand and is asking systematically for this sort of proof of provenance, traceability, and authenticity. The way that we've built Tracer, there's also a lot of value from the business side. Now that we've created a network, basically a connected value chain network powered at its foundational level by blockchain, now we can have the businesses interact. And if I just rewind all the way back, sorry for the big build, all these challenges there can be solved. Now we can help people quantify the risk. Now we can show and demonstrate ethically sourced materials. We can help with the compliance overhead. We can help the producers and manufacturers tell their individual stories. Manual processing becomes automated, and incompatible systems are now based on an industry utility, rather than having, we use the analogy of like a mobile phone. Imagine you had to have a phone for every person you called. Oh, here's my Erica phone, here's my Michelet phone, here's my Océane phone. We don't work that way. B2B platforms get us away from that. But the current incarnation of the industry is that we each have an individual phone. This is basically a B2B connectivity network between them all. And then the applications that can be based about that network, more efficient marketplaces is just one example. Better financing solutions is another. So this utility approach is something that's been required by consumers and businesses for a while. And the challenges to the adoption come by way of updating people. It's like a big step in some of the businesses we're working with to integrate to this kind of a platform. We're making sure that that's as easy as possible. Manufacturers are typically vertically integrated, so they can integrate to something like this easier. The smaller shops are probably the bigger challenge, and we need to make sure that as we're building this, we don't exclude anybody from participating, because Tracer is absolutely for and by the diamond industry. And it's also probably an important point to mention that it's a non-commercial initiative in terms of a utility just needs to support its cost for itself in terms of build, maintain, and extend. So that was a long version of the answer, but I hope it was a complete one.
Is the digital representation of the asset updated as a diamond passes through the value chain?
100%. And we can see it on the screen here. If we look at the manufacturer, we're appending data. It gets down to the jeweler, they have an opportunity to append data. So the base digital asset, which is created at the beginning of the value chain, is like an octahedral. It looks like a rough diamond. The first thing that's going to happen is when it gets to the manufacturer, they're going to solve this into potentially many pieces. And you see that in the planning phase, two polished outcomes there. And then we see the purple one go to cutting and polishing. But one digital asset at the beginning splits and branches to multiple digital assets, each of them being augmented with new data about the diamond itself to maintain traceability, but also supplementary data to help the businesses work more efficiently or to tell better stories about the diamond.
And Jim, just to add onto that one, typical examples are your 3D scans, images, videos. So there's multiple types of data that is collected along the way.
Yeah, that's right. I like the questions.
What kind of the key then for identifying the stones individually? If the stones get heat treated and or cut, does that not damage the key?
Yeah, it's a good point, because diamonds are, and this is like the pun, right? They're the hardest one to do because there's so much that happens to them. It's not like we just have one thing that we just take a look at once, and it's the same thing between the producer and the consumer. Diamonds, there's a lot that can happen to a diamond, and the Dave in question that asked this says heat treating, which can change the color. It can change a few things about it. We use hundreds of data points to identify a diamond. Not necessarily all at once. It depends, because like a rough diamond has characteristics, a polished diamond has characteristics. We'll use all of that data along the supply chain, and based on the situation, that is well enough to maintain traceability. And it's also a good point, because if something started out as one color, say it was brown, and then it was heat treated, and then all of a sudden it became clear, that didn't start out as a clear diamond, it started as a brown one. So what's the value? Should that be questioned? These are the sorts of things that were nigh impossible to discover before, which now, based on keeping track of that digital asset as it changes, we can observe.
Does every block refer to the previous block and together make the blockchain in it, right? And that if someone wants to change the record, how hard is it to crack the code?
So we've done a couple things to make sure that, first of all, the privacy is much more secure, and that anybody looking at the network isn't able to divine what's happening across the network between two counterparties. We do this through basically the address management of how we're sending these things through the value chain. How hard is it to crack? I think I would say extremely hard, because we see a lot of platforms out there built on the same or similar technologies that have many, many billions in value in it, which I'm sure that if somebody could break it and take all that money, they would have done it by now. So in terms of the specific nuance of how we're doing things, I don't want to elaborate and create a manual of how to attack our platform. So I might not tell you everything that we're doing, but we're testing through hardening the platform through our beta platform from October to date, and then through Q2, even though it's just kind of a strange quarter with the world shut down, we're moving to launch hopefully a little bit later this year when things get back to normal.
Question, have you looked at other use cases, for example, ethically mined precious metals?
I just wanted to elaborate on this one point that Michelet brought up, which is a big example of what we can do with a compound or a dual digital asset strategy. We've got digital assets at the material level, those are the diamonds. And we also create a completely separate ledger, which is creating digital assets, again, non-fungible tokens, more kind of a commodity or source of value, which are the documents. And here on the screen, you'll see on the left a grading certificate for diamonds. If anybody's got any experience, the kind of even reasonably valued diamonds are all graded by a number of grading labs. And the Tracr document validation service, which creates a digital asset of that documentation and assures that it's authentic. It also links it to the material level digital asset by way of the Tracr ID. So now any swapping of a grading certificate to the diamond or any documentation with the material underneath it becomes practically impossible because of the level of observation that we have over and through creating and amending and appending these digital assets through the supply chain. So any swapping, any forgery of certificates has now been rendered almost economically impossible. You'd have to spend a hell of a lot of money to try to get one by us. So that's an important feature of a dual ledger, dual digital asset strategy. And also what the consumer sees now is 4 panes, and these 4 kind of little vignettes or views have, from the left side, data-rich stories, which is the retail view. It could be any retail view. This one's for diamonds. The second one, the kind of darker one, is our third-party verification site where people can verify that the one they're looking at is in fact the one that they have. Another view is the provenance, traceability, and authenticity of that actual diamond that they're looking at. You can see here, this is all customizable. Any retailer and any jeweler can decide what this third view looks like. The view all the way to the left would just be on their own e-commerce site or in-store demo capabilities. But here we see the rough diamond, we see it's from Botswana, we see what it looks like polished, and if you were to scroll down, you'd see more stuff. And then the fourth pane is the Tracer document validation service, which is linking back the grading cert for that particular diamond to the digital asset of the diamond itself. Now, real hard. Like, when I say real hard, I mean like military grade robustness in terms of security and making sure that you can be assured that this cert is about this diamond and you can trust it. So now, beyond diamonds, that was the question. So maybe, Michelet, I'll turn that one over to you, and we can talk about what we're doing beyond diamonds.
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to cover that. I think just before I get into the specific collaborations, it's probably best to put things into context for the audience as well. But there are various industries, not just the diamond industry, that continue to face pressure from consumers, and Jim mentioned it earlier, from regulators, NGO groups, and just general civil society, because companies are being asked to demonstrate and verify that the products that they're selling have been ethically sourced. So, I mean, we're talking diamonds, but also battery metals, beef, coffee beans. I think people out there know better than I do. The list is endless, but they're also being asked to reduce the climate and environmental impacts of their activities. So those two key things are rising. So since early last year, and we can move on to the next slide for this one, we've been collaborating with various industries on their supply chain sustainability solutions, helping them by sharing our methodology and demonstrating our technologies that can help them think through specific needs for their commodities and their industry. So we're currently representing Anglo American. Anglo American is the parent company of the De Beers Group, as one of the 7 mining members of the World Economic Forum Mining and Metals Blockchain Consortium, very long title over there. And we are collectively exploring a shared blockchain platform. And this is particularly addressing the issue of carbon emissions. Now, what we're doing with this group is we're actively sharing our valuable learnings, our practical experience. We've just gone through how we've demonstrated what we do in the diamond industry, but we can share that with other industries as well. And it also helps us broaden our scope in that space. Then when it comes to, because the question was about other metals as well. Now, while we've perfected traceability for diamonds, the diamond needs to be mounted onto something else, right? Onto another material, another metal, and demonstrating to the consumer that the entire diamond ring has been ethically sourced is just as important, not just the diamond on its own. So as I said previously, we're naturally close to Anglo American, the world's largest producer of platinum. They supply roughly 38% of the world's platinum. And while we're in early discussions, that's obviously a natural way for us to collaborate on that front. Another thing that we're exploring is interoperability. So with Richline's trust chain, and the practical application of that will kick off later this year, but they've perfected the traceability of gold. And we believe as Tracer that the way that minerals and metals work in the real world is how they should work in the digital world as well. So the diamond digital asset that we spoke about earlier would operate on its own ledger, and the accompanying material, whether that's platinum or gold or anything else, is hosted on a different ledger. But if we interoperate with other platforms, the customer can receive 2 IDs, a combined ID, and this is verifying both journeys, both of the diamond and the other material. So demonstrating sustainable sourcing of both products, and that's an important aspect that we're going to be exploring and looking into as well. I just want to touch on one last point, just in terms of the broader picture. None of this is possible without the wider collaboration, and I think Jim touched on it earlier, but we're not here to reinvent the wheel when it comes to responsible sourcing standards. So there are a number of standards out there, and we're big on collaboration. So we are collaborating with the Responsible Jewelry Council, the best practice principles. These are all established code of practices for responsible sourcing. In addition to that, Anglo American is leading the way when it comes to IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. So it's just to stress the point that we're not going to reinvent the wheel when it comes to responsible sourcing. These industries know their specific industry very well. we're going to help them think through that with our methodologies and our technology. I think that's largely what I wanted to cover on the other minerals.
At this stage in the supply chain, how is the diamond ID registered to the blockchain? Is there human intervention required, or could it be registered by OCR or a scan to become truly automated?
It's a great question, and it's one that goes directly towards operational sustainability. I mentioned before there's sort of three, when I talk about platform sustainability and making sure we're building something that can go the distance, technical, operational, and economic sustainability are the three dimensions. This one is about operational sustainability. Can we automate certain parts of this process? Yes. We created 2 new kinds of robots in collaboration with De Beers Technologies that scans these diamonds one every couple of seconds, high resolution 3D surface scans, weights, situational information, and all of that is automated. So we can do, we've done now well over 100,000 diamonds in a month, and that's with our prototype technology. The sort of version 1 production technology is being rolled out as soon as the world unlocks itself, and that'll give us the ability to do effectively all of De Beers production from a certain size diamond and above. Other places in the industry, automation is not really possible because the physical processes can't be automated. They scan these diamonds one by one, they plan them. It's a very artisan process. I was really constantly amazed by what it takes to sculpt these little carbon crystals into what the consumer sees on their side. Maybe we can post a couple things on the Tracer community to just give a sense of the complexity and the level of sculpture required to create these little 57 facet round diamonds. That part of the process can't be automated because the physical process isn't. But that's okay, because when we say Tracer is industry scale, or this approach that we've developed is industry scale, what we mean by that specifically is that we can operate without slowing down the process as it is today at a baseline, and then in other places potentially speed it up, which is good. But yeah, the creation of the digital asset doesn't slow anybody down in terms of animating the Tracer platform and giving the consumer what they're looking for.
How is a digital asset managed once the product gets to the consumer? Can the consumer trade the asset?
Yeah, it's a good point. In the first version, the digital asset will stay with the retail brand that it gets down to. So say it gets down to like any well-known brand. Let's call out Cartier because they're pretty well-known as a diamond brand. The digital asset would remain with them on their instance of the Tracer platform, but the consumer would have access to all of the data. The reason for this is the technical sustainability on the consumer side. And we see this with cryptocurrencies in general. Like not everybody's grandmother has a crypto wallet. If we do want to transfer these digital assets to somebody, they need somewhere to house it. That's not going to be version 1. There's no real requirement for that. We've achieved our goal in terms of being able to have digital assets stay within the businesses on the downstream side, the retailer side. I fully expect that in later versions of Tracer, there'll be documents or materials where we do in fact transfer the diamonds to the consumer in some way. When the adoption of these technologies, when your smartphone comes out of the box with a crypto wallet installed, I think that'll be the moment where we really start to interoperate with the B2C side of a connected value chain.
Mm-hmm. This caters to newly mined diamonds. Do you have a solution for cut diamonds already in circulation? Awesome.
I feel like I would have seeded that question if it didn't. These questions are on point. I love it. The answer is yes, we do. We consider the tracers for the industry, by the industry, and the whole industry. Big producers, small producers, big diamonds, little diamonds, new diamonds, old diamonds. We can't look at a diamond that's been polished, say, from the 70s and understand where it came from. That's just not how it works. That's impossible. Maybe our understanding will change over time and then we'll adapt to it. But presently, a diamond that's been polished for many decades, you don't know where it came from. Or even the larger issue of having a lot of polished diamond stock through the value chain in the businesses, we need to account for that. We need a case. So in Tracr, there's a polished entry point, meaning that people can register their diamonds as a polished diamond. It won't have the original provenance because we don't have it. But at least from that moment onward, we've verified authenticity. We've helped the businesses trace and track their inventory in motion. And from that moment on, it can be traced to the consumer or wherever it's going. At that moment that a polished diamond is registered, the person registering it can provide any documentation that they have to substantiate any provenance claims. It won't be assured by Tracr. It'll be assured by the entity putting those on the platform, but at least there's an opportunity to handle that case, which is it's not an edge case. That's a big one.
If you verify the ethical standards of the producers, and if so, what do you look at or for?
Mm-hmm. So, Michelet, can I hand that one over to you in terms of all the certification that we're looking at from the mining side?
Absolutely. And look, like I said before, there's multiple different standards out there. So we would, never try to introduce something new. We'd use the existing ones. And I mentioned a few earlier. RJC have the Diamond Producers Association have their own standards, and so does IRMA. That's specifically for mine sites. And how we're seeing that is that's supplementary data. That is more information. So whether it's a mine site being certified, that certification is some form of data, and it's another form of verification. We would never actively ourselves go out and certify the mines, but there are a number of credible standards out there, and we'd obviously do our checks and our backgrounds on them, and they're well known as well. So again, the De Beers Group, they're working with RJC and the best practice principles. Those are well known, well established within the industry. And again, for us, that's both data, but it's also us not reinventing the wheel on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Michelet. And it also brings up kind of a side point that some of the data relates to one diamond or one thing on our type of solution, but some data or information can relate to many diamonds, like a mining standard in Namibia or South Africa or whatever, or a sustainability initiative in Botswana or Canada or wherever. And what we can do is attribute that information as supplementary data on the Tracr data sharing ecosystem to many diamonds. Say that you were certified during the period of 2019. Well, the diamonds went through your production in 2019. It would be ascribed with that type of certificate at that moment, not just anything from Botswana for all time was like this. And it gives a little bit more context to when things were certified, and that you can feel confident that sustainable mining was taking place not only just now, but when your particular diamond went through that area.
How does your system differ to the GIA M2M system? I believe that's a diamond grading system, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The GIA is the largest grading lab, and they have a diamond sort of origin program. The main differentiators between what Tracr is doing and what the GIA is doing is, first and foremost, the diamond never has to leave the possession of anyone. We observe the diamond on premise using technology. And this is how we can be basically technology sustainable for the industry. Whereas the other origin platforms, you'll need to send away the diamond to a place. It'll be there for a few days, and then it'll have to come back. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're dealing with tight margins of 3% in the manufacturing area of the industry, that's a big deal. That keeps your inventory away from you and increasing in cost and decreasing in time to value realization. So that's a big differentiator in terms of how Tracr works. We also are able to isolate a specific country of origin, not a list of countries. Other origin platforms will list that a diamond comes from maybe a half dozen countries. And that's just not the truth. A diamond comes from one spot, full story. And that's what you'll see on the Tracr platform. So there's a few nuances there, not least of which that Tracr, we consider it a utility for the diamond industry, and meaning it's priced as a utility. When you turn the tap on, you don't look at your watch to see how much you're spending on water. And Tracr is very similar to that. So that the economic sustainability of what Tracr is achieving for the diamond industry is on the utility cost profile, not on a premium service cost profile.
How long did it take to build this platform? And if you can answer the rough financial investment.
To the second part, no. So I appreciate people asking because it's a good question to ask. I would ask that question too, but I'm not going to answer it. On the first part of it, how long did it take to build? I came into Tracr in August 18. We started building the team. Michelet and Ossian have been with us for a year now. We're coming up on launch, and we've been in beta since October. So when was it sort of ready to show to people in terms of interacting? I'd say the October timeframe. And now we're really getting the end-to-end industry scale capabilities in front of everyone. There's sort of a lot of ways to answer how long did it take to build. We'll be building it for a while. Nothing's version 1 and done. But connecting up the industry and learning what it took to map our process over top of existing processes, that's not to be underestimated. If we got that wrong, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think that's probably the best way I can answer the question.
No, perfect. Thank you. That's all of that trend of questions for now. So I'll let you crack on.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I wanted to make sure we got through our second ledger in terms of the dual ledger strategy, a little glimpse into what the consumer interacts with, because that's essential, and the four sort of perspectives there in terms of the retail view, the third-party validation, provenance, traceability, authenticity, and then the documentation around it. Michelet covered what we're doing with the World Economic Forum, and there's another initiative that we've joined as well, which we can't talk about today, but stay tuned. And for all the questions, sort of the more technical questions in terms of how we're doing certain things, the best place to find all of those answers are on the community.tracr.com. Because we are working with an entire industry all at once with our small team, we need a scaling function to just interact with so many people. And forums like this are great for that. And the Tracr community is another one of those forums. So if you point your smartphone camera at that QR code, that'll zap you over to the Tracr community free of charge. You can create a login and have a look at some of the events and documentation and a lot more kind of the next level detail about what we covered today, which is sort of like the more business level, contextual level data.
Thank you very much to Jim and Michelet for explaining about Tracr and the diamond value chain. And thanks for supporting this series of Tech for Sustainability webinars.
And I'd like to say a big thank you to Erica, Crypto Curry Club, and everyone who put this together. Sustainability is, that's all that really matters. If we're just living on a big dead rock, no good. So everything we can do to bring attention and education towards any sustainability topic is one we'd like to spend our time on. So thank you for giving us access to the forum and really appreciate it.
Thank you. And